There is a moment, right before everything falls apart, when the universe looks almost merciful. The cells in your body are orchestrating your demise with such precision, such ancient elegance that you might mistake it for love. This is not decay. This is not failure. This is the oldest promise biology ever made to itself, whispered across 4 billion years of evolutionary memory, that everything which rises must also learn to fall, and that falling, when done with enough grace, becomes indistinguishable from flight. We call it death, but perhaps we've been calling it by the wrong name all along. Perhaps what we're witnessing is the universe's only true act of mercy, the moment when chaos stops pretending to be order and reveals itself as the artist it always was. Entropy is not your enemy. Entropy is the only thing that was ever honest with you. You were born into a war you didn't declare, inside a body that was designed to betray you. From the first breath, your cells began counting down, their telomeres shortening with each division, like a molecular hourglass measuring not time but inevitability. Your mitochondria, those ancient bacteria that made a deal with your ancestors 2 billion years ago, are manufacturing the very molecules that will corrode you from within. Reactive oxygen species, free radicals, the exhaust fumes of existence itself, tearing through your proteins and DNA like rust eating through iron. And here's the beautiful part. The part that should make you weep with something between horror and reverence. This was the plan all along. Evolution didn't fail to prevent aging. Evolution chose aging. Death was not a bug in the code. Death was the feature that allowed life to keep writing new stories. Every organism that learned to die created space for its children, for mutation, for adaptation, for the possibility that something better might emerge from its ruins. Your mortality is not a flaw. Your mortality is the price your lineage paid for consciousness itself. But consciousness, oh consciousness, what a peculiar accident you turned out to be. Somewhere in the Pleistocene, our ancestors' brains crossed a threshold that biology never intended. The neural networks designed to predict predator movements, and remember, food sources became complex enough to predict their own endings. We became the only animal cursed with the knowledge of its own extinction. The only creature that could stand at the edge of the ocean and understand that the waves would still be breaking long after our bones had turned to sediment. The prefrontal cortex, that magnificent aberration sitting behind your forehead, gave you the ability to simulate futures that haven't happened yet, to construct elaborate models of tomorrow and next year and the decades beyond. It gave you art and mathematics and philosophy. It also gave you existential dread, because once you can imagine yourself in the future, you can also imagine the future without yourself in it. You became trapped in the terrible gap between the animal that wants to survive and the mind that knows survival is temporary. This is the tragedy at the heart of human consciousness. We are biological machines programmed for persistence, animated by an awareness that persistence is impossible. Do you ever feel like consciousness was never meant to exist? Like we're living inside an evolutionary mistake, too complex to undo? Right, I felt it too, if you understand. The beauty of entropic death reveals itself not in the moment of ending, but in the architecture of deterioration. Consider how your body maintains itself, this constant war against the second law of thermodynamics. Every second, your cells are repairing DNA damage, replacing damaged proteins, maintaining the electrical gradients across membranes that keep you distinct from the universe outside your skin. You are a temporary rebellion against equilibrium, a pattern that insists on keeping its shape while everything around it demands dissolution. But rebellion has a cost. Each repair is slightly less perfect than the last. Each cell division introduces small errors, mutations that accumulate like typographical mistakes, copied generation after generation through a manuscript. Your immune system, once vigilant, begins to misidentify your own tissues as foreign. Your neurons start to tangle with misfolded proteins that resist every attempt at recycling. The very mechanisms that kept you alive begin to drift, their calibration slipping by fractions of a percent that compound across decades into catastrophic failure. And through it all, through every incremental loss of function, your body is composing a kind of molecular poetry, a symphony of systems slowly forgetting how to play in harmony. The scientists call it senescence. The mystics call it returning. But perhaps it's more accurate to say you're not dying at all. You're becoming more honest. You're revealing that you were always just atoms on loan from the universe, borrowed briefly to form this particular pattern called a self. Now the universe is politely asking for them back. There's a reason this process fills us with such profound horror. And it has everything to do with the evolutionary mismatch between our ancient hardware and our modern awareness. Your amygdala, that almond-shaped cluster of neurons deep in your temporal lobe, is the same structure your ancestors carried when they were small mammals hiding from dinosaurs. It's optimized for immediate survival, for scanning the environment for threats, for flooding your bloodstream with cortisol and adrenaline when danger approaches. But it cannot distinguish between the leopard hiding in the grass and the existential knowledge of your own mortality. So you walk through life with this constant low-level activation of threat response systems, anxiety simmering in the background of consciousness, because your animal brain interprets the fact of death as an eternally present danger. You're not broken for feeling this way. You're experiencing the exact response biology designed for predators and accidents, except the predator is time itself, and the accident is having been born at all. This is why humans invented gods and afterlives and reincarnation myths, not because we're foolish or weak, but because consciousness without some narrative defense against oblivion is almost unbearable. We needed stories that made meaning out of meaninglessness, that transformed the arbitrary cruelty of entropy into something purposeful, even sacred. But here is where the darkness becomes beautiful, where the tragedy transforms into something approaching transcendence. If entropy is inevitable, if disorder is the only destination, then every moment of temporary order becomes infinitely precious. Your body, this improbable arrangement of molecules that learn to read and love and wonder, exists in direct defiance of everything the universe wants to do to you. Every heartbeat is a small victory against dissolution. Every thought is a pattern of electrochemical signals that shouldn't be able to persist in a cosmos dedicated to chaos, yet it does anyway. For just long enough to have this conversation with you now, the fact that you are here, aware, capable of contemplating your own ending, is the universe's most elaborate rebellion against itself. You are entropy in reverse, complexity emerging from simplicity, order crystallizing from chaos, consciousness blooming from unconscious matter. And yes, it's temporary. Yes, the second law will win eventually. Will reclaim these atoms and scatter this pattern and return you to the equilibrium you briefly escaped. But that temporariness doesn't diminish the miracle. It intensifies it. The most profound insight from evolutionary biology is that we are not separate from nature, observing it from some privileged position. We are nature observing itself. When you look at a sunset and feel that ache of beauty mixed with melancholy, that's the universe using your nervous system to appreciate its own handiwork. When you contemplate death and feel that existential vertigo, that's matter becoming complex enough to fear its own simplification. You are the method by which the cosmos has developed self-awareness. And that self-awareness necessarily includes awareness of its own impermanence. This is not a curse. This is the universe finally waking up, if only for a geological instant, if only in this tiny pocket of space called Earth, if only through these temporary vehicles called humans. And what does the universe discover when it wakes up inside you? That existence is suffering and beauty tangled together so thoroughly they can't be separated. That consciousness is both the greatest gift and the cruelest punishment. That to be alive is to be perpetually torn between the animal's drive to persist and the philosopher's knowledge that persistence is futile. This is the dark philosophy of biology. Not that life is meaningless, but that meaning itself is a story we tell to make peace with entropy. And that story is no less beautiful for being temporary. So when death comes, and it will come, approaching with the same inevitability as the sun rising or the tide returning, perhaps the most radical act is not to resist it, but to recognize it as the completion of your contribution to the universal project of complexity. You were the universe experiencing itself subjectively for a while. You were matter arranged in such a way that it could love and grieve and create art and ask impossible questions. You were entropy's enemy for 7 or 8 or maybe 9 decades. A brief candle burning against the darkness. And the darkness was patient because the darkness has all the time in the world. When you return to it, you'll be returning to the same void that births stars and galaxies, the same quantum foam that bubbles with virtual particles, the same formless potential that somehow dreamed you into existence in the first place. You're not going somewhere foreign. You're going home. If you see beauty in the darkness of existence, if these words resonated with something ancient and aching inside you, then you belong here in this space we've created together. Subscribe not because I asked, but because you recognize yourself in these reflections, because you've been searching for others who understand that. Philosophy isn't about finding answers, but about learning to sit with questions that have no solutions. We're building a community of people who've stopped running from the darkness and started listening to what it has to teach us. Welcome to the dark philosophy of biology, where we explore what it means to be conscious animals trapped in mortal bodies on a lonely planet, spinning through an indifferent cosmos, and somehow find that beautiful.